All right, we're back. So, welcome everybody. Rise of the Savage Intellectual. I don't feel like being here today,
I do.
and that's why we're here, man. Because sometimes when you're not feeling like doing what you're doing, you got someone that keeps you on track. So we figured it'd be good to record Bitter Old Man John on a special edition where we're just gonna kind of go through some things Jay's researched and looked at, which I think is like really common as a coach. Like you get a lot of people, like just when somebody hears like, oh, you're a personal trainer, or you're a strength coach, or you're a trainer, or oh, you live healthy, then they start throwing, oh, I heard this, I read this, I saw this. So I think it'd be interesting to do that. I think I termed the show using spirituality to get jacked. So Jay sent me a little blurb on something. I like quickly scanned it and I was like, I don't want to read it. I want to read it live, like to get the live reaction. So I got enough of it. Once I saw it was like something to do with spirituality, I was like, oh yeah, we could go forever.
Make it run.
As it relates into like a strength program, or working out, getting healthy, yada yada. Because I did have an interesting conversation yesterday with someone about the difference between health and fitness. And that, people think that, oh, well, I'm healthy and fit, or I'm physically fit. So, and we'll get into that because like terminology is important because fitness in my coaching world is linked to performance, and it'll come at the sacrifice of health. That's why your top tier athletes, the best of the best, all have some type of degradation, if I'm using the right word, to their health, whether it's short term or long term. Female gymnasts, can suppress their menstrual cycle all the way up to, we all know the story of like, Jim Brown or why well, actually, we all know the story. That's a very selective football thing, but Jim Brown retired early. A part of it was, seeing guys before him that couldn't walk because their knees were destroyed, like Earl Campbell, I think it was. So it's they became some of the greatest athletes, but then they had to deal with a lot of damaged joints and so forth when they got later. So, performance and fitness are kind of linked together and synonymous, but they're a different word than health. And sometimes for your health, you have to sacrifice your performance or your fitness. And the example I could give on that is that there was a year when Peyton Manning took off from playing football because he had the neck surgery, and that had to do with his health, so he could move and walk and be healthy. That's his health. And, he came back and took a year off, and that's his performance, right? So he had to sacrifice his performance, which is his fitness. So anyway, I think spirituality is another thing that kind of gets intertwined with religion. And, people can make that same fitness and health mistake that they make with religion and spirituality. So, yeah. So is there anything you want to say, and then jump into me reading this that you sent me?
Yeah. Yeah, a friend of mine sent me that this morning. Yeah, health or fitness. Yeah, that's interesting. I'm not as well versed on that. I mean, I eat pretty well, but it's not. I haven't been studying it for years. I'm not trained in it. But the spirituality versus religion, I do have lived experience as far as that goes. And I heard a expression, and I don't know. Spirituality is for people. Religion is for people who don't want to go to hell, and spirituality is for people who have already been there.
Yeah,
I know that puts some people off. I know people are like, oh, that's could be an ignorant statement, but it's not. It's just an honest.
Well, it's interesting. It's funny, like what podcast doesn't refer back to Joe Rogan?
Yeah,
but I just watched. I watched a 3/4 of the one he recently did with this guy. I think his name is Wesley Huff, and he's a Catholic like scholar. I don't know how to put it. I don't know what the right way to explain it to him, which is funny but he's, I believe, like more of like a linguist. So, and as him and Joe are talking, he talks about the fact that, or Joe has like mentioned some of his like, religious jokes that he's made in his act, and the guy can kind of laugh at it. And it's like, that's a guy who takes his Catholicism really serious. It's his whole education system. He actually recreates parts of the documents that are destroyed. Like, and he's so good that he can make them near perfect. You know, and
Yeah.
the ancient languages, and he reads all the ancient languages. And he kind of got popular recently because he did like a debate with this guy Billy Carson, Billy Carson was this guy who kind of was rising to social media fame because he was talking a lot about the Anunnaki and that the Egyptian pyramids were really built by this superior race that was just breeding humans. And this guy Wesley Huff was like is a high level academic, I guess you could say, and he was like, no, like you're confusing the language. You can't make these simple. Like, what the popular thing Billy Carson would say is when you say amen, amen, you're saying amen, which is Amen Ra. You're actually saying amen, which is the Anunnaki god. You're actually praying to the Egyptian god. And the guy Wesley Huff's like, whoa, 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 whoa! Like, you just made a huge leap by massive, like, centuries of language to try and make a really, super coincidental thing.
Yep.
That he can track like through the actual real scripture and literature and all the other texts that he studied to say, okay, well, this is the genesis, so to speak, of where amen, like the prayer amen, or where it comes from. And he knows like prehistoric Hebrew and Akkadian and Assyrian, like he knows all those languages and he can like read, so that's like what he does. And so I found it interesting where I felt like that social media has done that, where like whether it's history or religion or spirituality or health and fitness, is you get a lot of these, like, and now they're kind of referred to as influencers, where they really don't have the formal academic training or experience to really kind of be talking on their subjects, and they're kind of regurgitating information. And somebody had mentioned to me, it's like the old school game telephone where you kind of whisper something in someone's ear. It's like social media has now become the telephone game of like information. Someone hears it from someone who hears it, and it's like they don't really hear it right, or they don't understand it right, and then they replicate it. But yeah, so I think spirituality is one of those things, and it comes up, we're going to go through the controllables, and it comes up in our controllable think. We talked about the BMS, body, mind, spirit. So all right, so let's get into it. Let me pull it up.
I read that. Yeah, I read that.
All right, let's see what we got. I got my old man glasses now. Oh, I can read this so much better now. This is great. Okay. So let me say who first is. So this is from, can I say who this is from first?
Yeah, Rabbi, the rabbi.
So this is from the founder and medical director of the Gateway Rehabilitation Center in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Abraham J. Twersky is a rabbi, psychiatrist, chemical dependency counselor, and the author of many books, including Addictive Thinking, Understanding Self-Deception. Okay. So here's the quote we're going to start to route around. Let's see what we have here. Much is made of spirituality these days, in recovery, in the culture at large. But what exactly does spirituality mean? Is it something different to people? Is it something different to different people? How is it discovered, nurtured, expressed? And perhaps most important, why does it matter? To the thicket of questions surrounding the subject, this book brings clear vision to thoughtful approach that will help us find our way to the very heart of spirituality. Writing simply and directly, Abraham Twersky shows how spirituality, independent of religion, is central to emotional and mental health and is a key to being truly and profoundly human. As you can tell, it's like one of the first times I'm reading with my glasses. I hate them. But all right, man, so break this down for me. I think I don't think there's anything to okay. I thought it was going to be something a little bit crazy or controversial, but no, this is some pretty like just straightforward. I think what is central to everything is, man's search for meaning.
Viktor Frankl.
Yep. 100%. Thank you. Yeah. Because I couldn't think of who said that. Thank you.
Yeah,
or who wrote that. And I think that in my limited knowledge in studying history, I always it's interesting to me, the patterns. Like, so for instance, I referenced that podcast with Joe Rogan and Wesley Huff was, they talk about how the positive and negative of the Roman Empire and translating the Bible is that there was a ton of them. Like, so he says, hey, in the ancient Jews, they didn't want everybody to have it. They wanted every book to be perfect and done. So they slowed it down. And well, you know this with the Jews, there's the 3 denials. They don't want everybody converting to being Jewish. So then you have the Romans and Christianity. They want this to proliferate all over the place, right? So the good news is that, hey, there's a lot of copies of this New Testament, so to speak. But the negative side is there's a lot of like bad copies, But what I found fascinating was the guy said, because there's so many at least bad copies, we can recognize patterns that tell you these type of mistakes would only be made in this century, and these type of mistakes would only be. And my mind was like, I liked it. It's a cool. It's not the normal Joe Rogan, crazy, thing, but you can just tell it's kind of like one of those episodes when he has Eric Weinstein on.
Yep.
It's just mind-blowing depth, but this is, instead of it super intellectual or physics, it's about, ancient texts and, whether it's so this guy is the child of missionaries, born in Pakistan, raised up there, then moved to like different places, and then is raised Christian, but he was like, I was reading the Quran at 13.
It's young.
So he was like, I was exposed to everything in a very open format. And that's, and then he fuels this desire to, study religious ancient texts. But this guy, Billy Carson, became really popular on the internet for, as we get back to our main point of saying, oh, this is the Anunnaki or this, and there were this, and the Garden of Eden is Eden. And and it was just like, and this guy who's a language expert was like, dude, you're just not even close. Like, you're not, like, you're just really like a child playing with like numbers, being like, oh, look, these go together. And he was very polite and respectful. But I think that's where, in our fitness coaching world, so like when we do the think component, we're talking about spirituality because it gives you purpose. And when I said, and when you're looking at patterns, all throughout all different cultures, there's this unique heroic arc that's told in all, across all mythologies, across all, from the beginning of, storytelling. It's it's the traditional, I believe it's named it's these template's not the right word, but it's the template for stories, and it's called the St. George arc. Like, you go into the cave to slay the dragon to bring back the gold or bring back the princess. And what that is an archetypal story, hero's journey, the archetypal hero's journey.
Yep.
I was trying to get to, is that you have to go into the darkness and slay a demon or dragon and then bring back, but it's incumbent upon you to bring back that gold or that princess, because you're bringing back the light to your community. It's not just enough to go into the darkness and slay the dragon. You've got to bring it back to the community.
Yes.
So you see the same pattern develop everywhere, in every type of, mythology or religion. So we know that, this concept that man has to go on a journey to find what his purpose is, and whether that journey is actually physical, and whether there's a real dragon versus slaying your personal demon. Like, there's all those like layers that eventually your Jungs and Freuds would come to explain, right? Like, why are we self-sabotaging? Why are we sabotaging our own journey? All right, well, Freud might say it's this, and Jung's talking about the shadow, right? It's like Jung would then, I would assume, would interpret, or educationally guess that he would interpret as like your dragon is whatever inner demon self-sabotage shadow that's holding you back. So you have to go on a journey, whether that's eating clean and working out, whether that's travel, it doesn't necessarily have to be travel, right? So we know there's always this search for meaning. So when I do my coaching and I put together the components, and the first component, which is think, I don't have to be a psychologist to know that, the self-sabotaging is mental, right?
Oh yeah.
So we got to start there. And great strength coaches and functional coaches like Charles Poliquin and Paul Chek. Like Paul Chek will say the best workout, he says, is the best workout is the one you'll do every day. Just because there's so much lack of movement in the general population. And Charles used to say, the best diet you can write for someone is the one they'll follow. Compliance. He had a thing, compliance is king. So it doesn't matter how smart you are, you can write the greatest workout program in the world, but if you can't get the client to follow it, it's irrelevant. And I found that to be a big ego issue with a lot of strength coaches when I was like looking at MMA and even in sports in general. It was like all about the client finishing the workout program that they wrote versus adjusting the workout program to how the conditioning of the athlete was at the time.
Yep.
Just, so spirituality winds up becoming one of those components of think, because discipline and motivation become another, right? They're the other two words that people confuse, at least in part, that, well, I'm motivated to get this done. Oh, no, you need to be disciplined to get this done. There's a little bit of a difference there. Motivation fades.
Definitely.
Yeah, discipline. So it's like discipline will keep you consistent, and consistency is king, and compliance is king when you're working with your clients. So eventually, as a coach, I wind up going backwards, realizing like, I got, in order to keep people, no matter how good the diet is and the program is, it's irrelevant if I can't get them to buy in. And I felt, one of the things I felt I was good as a strength coach with the fighters, because it was the first time that I had to really deal with diets. Like I never had to worry about weight cuts, is what I should say. I had a real small, like maybe 3 wrestlers in my whole, like I just didn't really care for wrestling, training wrestlers. I was lucky when I was a young trainer. I always had people who want to train with me more than the hours I had to train. So it was always a part-time kind of thing. So I could always have a good selection of clients. So I love training football players. Because I love the sport. I hated training golfers. I was just telling somebody the other day, is like, if you're young, go train golfers. They'll pay you a stupid amount of money if you can get 2 strokes off their game. The ego in golf is insane. They'll pay you top dollar if you can just work, whatever. And so I think that, when you look at like, okay, how do I keep complying? I got to get into their heads. And when you get into their heads, you start realizing, okay, one of the things that will keep someone most disciplined is having some type of purpose bigger than themselves. Right. So that's kind of how I, as a coach, looked at the system and backed into, a lot of Paul Chek. This is a lot of Paul Chek influence. And Chek does a lot of this stuff in his upper level HLC classes. I haven't done them, but I've met the coaches. And when I've talked to some coaches and I say, hey, this is kind of what I've come about on my own, they're like, oh, so did you do this class? And I'm like, no. And they're like, oh, that you would really like it because what you're talking about is down that road, So I know Chek does a lot of this stuff with spirituality and checking in. He's the one I watch to get into like Tai Chi and Qigong and stuff like that. But I don't have to get that deep with my clients, right? So I kind of keep within my realm. So I just kind of get them on the mantras. I get them on the positive journaling. And then I let that, obviously not let, but I kind of work with them on whatever their spiritual thing is. But I had that conversation with them, like what's your religion? I've had Muslims, I've had all different types of religions, especially when you're, dealing with athletes, you know what I mean? Because you're going to get all walks of life. But yes, we do the spirituality. So I think that when you're looking at what this gentleman is that you presented, and he's working with people that are coming out of addiction, and something that you've worked with, and you understand the psychology behind it and so forth, and much more well-read on this than I am. I have worked with some people as a coach who have had 1 or 2 different types of addiction. And I was literally again, talking about this, I think it was yesterday, where as a coach, I've had to like be careful or tell some of my staff, like, this person is, has come out of a substance abuse or addiction. Many times they're going to latch onto health and fitness in an over training way because they're going to compensate. They're going to kind of like trade one addiction. So they're going to trade. I call it like trading a lesser evil. You're trading one evil for a lesser evil. And, really, if your addiction is going to the gym every day and counting all your calories, I mean, I understand it could be termed more of an OCD or control issue or anxiety control issue or whatever versus of an addiction, but it's kind of that in that addictive realm of like, I have to do it. I've met people where I'm like, listen, you don't have to weigh your food. Like it's irrelevant. Oh, no, I have to. I'm like, oh, and it took me a while as a coach where I became more educated, well read. I'm like, oh, I see. And I remember I look back at my forms and I have like an in-depth part Q and I'm like, oh yeah, that person was recovering from this. And it doesn't always have to be substance. Sometimes I've seen it with people that don't handle a divorce very well. Your quote, what people kind of like to throw all together into a midlife crisis, and now suddenly they want, you're seeing it now with men in their 40s. Like now everyone's on TRT, everyone's jumping on it and it's like, and they're acting like they're 20 again.
Does that work? Joe, side note, do you think TRT works or?
Oh, hell yeah, it does. It's steroids. Steroids work. So
there's a side effects. There's a negative. There's always a.
So here's the. It's funny. That's another topic I haven't gotten to.
Testosterone. So TRT just for testosterone replacement therapy.
Yeah. So TRT. When somebody says TRT, testosterone replacement therapy, what they should mean is I went to a doctor. I had my levels tested. I believe if you're under 800, and I always screw this up, nanodecagram liters per meter. It's like ng/ml, nanodecograms.
Nanograms per milliliters.
Per deciliter or something like that. Yeah. But it's 800. Because I remember the number. If you're under that, then you can get prescribed TRT. I'm pretty sure. I could be checked on that. And then your doctor prescribes it to you, and it could come either as a cream or it can come as a shot. And it's typically within the range of like 100 to 200 milligrams, I think, a week, which to give you,
so it's weekly,
which to give you an idea, like where we went to school at, those football players, they were doing like 1,000 to 2,000 a week.
Wow.
So like at least 1,000 a week. So I say something on 250, 3 shots a week is 750. Yeah, at least 1,000 mgs a week.
Yeah, I mean, another point I would like to go down.
And I went to a very preposterous.
Yeah, as far as like the difference between deco and some of the different types of enhancement therapies. I was just wondering for. You mentioned balance. Just want to back up a little bit. Discipline versus motivation, and it gives you, the purpose. Your purpose in life. Some people's careers do. The spirituality. That direction. My mentor, sponsor and mentor. He, good friend of mine. He tells me, not to leave the house. He said, Jay, you shouldn't touch that doorknob until you are centered. Having your coffee or tea, whatever it is, tea. I gave up caffeine. About a month or 2 months ago. And, he said, sit down, your readings, prayers, whatever you do, I happen to use a combination of the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, some prayers and some Bible stuff, Old Testament stuff, just to get the day started.
That's awesome.
And it's a habit that I've gotten myself into after, my last misstep at with the job. It's like I wasn't doing that. Self-care, part of self-care.
Do you remember a guy by the name of Brian Gomez that went to Rowan?
I do remember his name.
Brian is doing amazingly well in life. He is
played football. Was he right?
Yeah, he played like one. He went there. He transferred there to play football, and then he wound up playing because the team was just, like I said, it was a very interesting team environment there.
He's doing well.
He's doing super well. Started Hispanic Chamber of Staten Island. Did all these great things in banking, and that's not necessarily his strong suit. He's had to work really hard to study and all that. And what I want to express to you is he went through a very difficult divorce and then rebuilt his life and has his daughters and he has a great relationship with his son. And one of the things I saw him do, and it took me a while to understand, and it's like, and it speaks to what you're doing, is he would wake up, and as soon as he would wake up, he would take the Bible off his desk. So I stayed with him a little bit when I went back to New Jersey, and I went back to finance. It's irrelevant. And so I would be, wake up in the morning to make breakfast or coffee, and then I'd see inside the door, and he would just out of his bed, and then he would go right to the verse. And he was like, I always just so that no crazy thoughts get in his head. No, and he's always, even before he walks out of his bedroom, putting himself in the right mindset. And I think if I had to go back, and he's got a lot of great qualities, but I think that might be at the crux of what he was able to build upon, and that's purpose and spirituality. So when you're saying, and I love what your sponsor is saying, is like, I love the fact that you're going to some of these types of texts and being like, oh, I'm going to check on myself. And I have something similar. I'm not as I do what I have to do, what I found for me, but I am in that mode where if I'm not all ready to go for the day, I'm not. Like, I'd rather just have it, I don't want to, I don't really technically call in sick, but I can I can work from home, so to speak. Right. So if there's an issue or if it's me, I'll reschedule it, because I just know if I'm not at my best out there, it's just,
No, if we're not 100%, and that's the whole point, and that's the whole, kind of bring it around. That's the whole point of, when I was like, John, I have this intuition. I don't want to say, like spiritual experience, but just an intuition, of like, you have to try to do all these things to get life back in order and to level up and be beyond where I was before, because I was on a good path. I mean, we can go it's not about me, but the self-care part, that balance, and that the subconscious, I think you and I both have a lot to offer as far as like knowledge, and the application of the knowledge, and this podcast does that. It produces that accountability, and it produces that, okay, this is what I'm doing today. I'm putting it out there. The intuition is to help people, but eventually that's down the road. Right now it's like, physician, heal thyself. And I still have some things I'm working through. I'm still have some things, if I had a job Monday, would I be able to go in there and do the job? Yes. Would I be 100%? We'll see, maybe 90. I don't know. But I want to be at 100%, my 100% best, so I can be of service to other people and help other people. If not, then like you said, you're at work, but not really working from home.
Well, speaking of this, like, what, and like resource to help people, would you be cool with sharing one of like your favorite things to read that anchors you? Like, if someone doesn't know, you'd be like, hey man, I I always tell people I have that video saved of like Jocko's Good.
That's a good one. I go to that once in a while. I do go to Jocko, and I do think of that. The thing I'm supposed to read, well, the thing that it was suggested that I read is in the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, 84 to 88, and it goes about selfishness. So addiction in general is a selfish disease. It's considered like, that's the whole thing, to root out that selfishness. Everything was about that, whatever that feeling, whatever it is. And so 84 to 88 was what was suggested for me. So there's a couple things I take out of here. What I have is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. So what I have going on that day is just a reprieve, and that's one of the things that I read. One of the lines. Another one of them is the third step prayer. Is God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me, to do with me as thy will. Relieve me from the bondage of self, so I may be better help to better service to others. Take away my difficulties, so victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May thy will, not mine, be done. So it's saying,
nice, man.
Help me get over this.
Nice.
Yeah, no, I say it every day. I said it a lot. I say it when I'm in the dentist chair and I'm squeezing my ribs, like, all right, God, remove me from the bondage of self. It's that constant reminder, because this is, addiction. And again, I didn't want to understand that addiction was a disease. I didn't get it for a while. Now I've accepted, like, look, the shame of it is, if someone had cancer, people are kind to them, like helpful. With addiction, we're the not nice parts of our personality comes out. So we're, angry, and we rage, and we are not we're quite unscrupulous. So it doesn't lend for people to want to help, and it lends the push away. And that's the whole dialectic part of this disease. It's help me, help me, help me. But, the disease wants you alone. It wants you isolated. That's, again, cancer wants you dead. And so does addiction.
Yeah. And a good analogy is if you've ever been taught how to like save somebody when they're drowning, a lot of times you have to like you approach them from behind and you take them by the neck because they need help and they want help,
but they'll take you out.
They'll take you down if you don't know how to help them right, if you're not prepared. And I think it also speaks to what I would say a worse situation in society is that if you kind of step backwards a few steps, like why would people, like you said, why would people, if you had bipolar disorder and you were going up and down, people would be like, oh, I take pity on you. I have to help you. I have to get in your center. But you do have this bipolarization, let's say, of your emotions when you are drunk or other drugs. I know, but let's just say keep it narrow. I have a lot of good experience with alcoholism in my family. So you see this polarity of emotion. But it's like, oh, well, alcohol is normal and it's really not that big of a deal and you should be able to handle it. So not like, oh, whoa, this is a highly addictive drug. No, I'm saying this is this subconscious. What do they call that? When you become desensitized, like how we talk about, oh, there's so much violence. So now kids are desensitized to the violence.
Yeah.
Believe things like alcohol and cigarettes, because of the way they were marketed and presented it and being so socially, so normally accepted. Like you go back, even when we were kids, it was normal for a lot of kids' parents to come home and throw down like 2-3 scotches. Well, that's alcoholism. Like if you're that consistent and regular, right? Like if you're having 3 drinks every night, 7 nights a week, and if not, you're going to develop it. Like that is a very strong, spirits. Alcohol is a very strong drug that will get into your genes, so to speak, and really create this addiction. It becomes a biochemical thing, right?
It can, yeah. I mean, that's a whole nother rabbit hole about.
Yeah, but the idea is that so to back step a little bit, if you look at like why people are sitting here being like, okay, I don't want to help them, or they're drunk, or I tried to help them, they hurt me. Whereas when there's other conditions, they're quicker to help the more you're. But again, it's like that drowning analogy of you got to make sure you're really. Listen, I can speak from that, I guess. I went through, and some of it. Really trying to care about somebody who had a lot of things wrong with them, mentally. I shouldn't say a lot of things, but they're one condition or 2 conditions that were very deeply wrong with them. And I was a pretty damn well-educated and well-versed and very confident in who I was, especially when I came back from Israel and everything I was building and putting together. And I easily slipped into like trying to save someone and drowning and not, so like you really got to know your own personal boundaries, So, I mean, I get it on one side, right? Like we look at both sides of it. It's when you have this addiction, it's really hard for people to help you. But in the same time frame, those of us that go out there and help people. And I think that's also why, and I know we're really spinning off, but I think that's why they say all the healers, like all the light bringers, are people that had to walk through the darkness.
Yeah.
Because we understand a little bit better, like when you lash out, or we understand how to take our boundaries, right? So we can keep our self-peace at bay. But again, and that would wrap back to
also the spirituality piece. It goes back, the main, the thing here, definitely.
Well, there was something you said that I did want to ask you about, which was what was the first thing? Not the prayer, but the
contingent. All I have is a daily reprieve from this contingent on the maintenance of my spiritual condition.
Yeah, can you?
What your friend did, what Goins did, that was twofold. Like when he first got out of bed, that's the subconscious that he was saying, because their subconscious is developed when we wake up and before we go to bed, and that's what drives our actions and our behaviors, like what's really deep down. And the other thing was to have that connection. So he had that connection twofold. As soon as he woke up, boom, subconscious developing, positive mindset, positive influence, spiritual influence, because there are God centers in our brain. there's God. We have God centers, and one of the things that my sponsor tells me, access that God center instead of the self center. The self-centered fear, like that's basically what it comes down to. From what I've learned, and that's another reason why I wanted to get on and do the podcast. And again, as we go on, it'll be more. I'm sure it'll be more streamlined and more like, all right, we're doing this. For
Yeah.
now, there's a whole rabbit hole. Well, I don't even
Just
know.
pure
Maybe
fucking
not.
chaos.
I don't care. It's all right with me. I'm herky jerky. I'm unorthodox as they come.
Yes.
But
Let everybody else be
you think
organized.
the body, mind, spirit. 5 controllables. And the spirituality piece, and my expertise, I guess, with lived experience with the self-destructive, and the addiction piece, but also with the being trained, with the program, going through the 4-step with Alcoholics Anonymous, and basically like having that gift of desperation. I don't have a problem with the higher power. I don't have a problem with God. I mean, I know I'm here, great creator, spirit in the sky, whatever it is. I don't like preach like Jesus. I mean, again, the religious part of it, I I know that there's something that's not me because I'm still here.
Mm.
I'm still here. And I know that I'm like to give total control. That's what the whole program is, to give will, like God gives will. This is where the philosophical part comes.
Mm.
Does God give us will? Yeah, I think God gives me the will to make the decision. If the decision goes sideways, there's certain consequences. There's certain lessons that I need to learn. My soul needs to learn in this life because I believe we are spirits bound to this flesh. We're not humans having spiritual experience. We're spirits having a human experience. And some
Yeah, I
people
heard that
say
one. That was
it's
it. I read it.
semantics. Some people say it's semantics. I just think that like some
I
people,
will. It is
I don't know.
semantics. It is semantics, but that's not a negative thing. Semantics is just the structuring of the language, and
Yeah.
I love semantics, and that's kind of why I enjoy that saying. I like word plays.
Yeah, and it's I think it's true. Like, regardless, we have to deal with the fact that we need to navigate this world and make money and or to survive. Survive and on different levels that at different times it could change. But the main thing, what I think is, after it's all done like that, I think we're souls. I think that like Da Vinci and Edison and those ones who made a real contribution to the earth, to the world, they remembered, their souls remembered their stuff from their past. Like I do think that Da Vinci was a soul who had other real
Connections to
connection talents from before, from that he learned before or was sent down. I don't know. Again, we can go down that rabbit hole, but I do think that what we talked about is that spirituality and that balance, that balance of work, 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 but not having that self-care. So that's what really the driving force is, that self-care. And part of the self-care is the accountability. Like, hey, John, how you doing today? Did this morning, had this, ate this. Oh, I need to do this. Oh, all right. Just to kind of parlay, what our goals are for the day and how we're going to achieve them. Because we know how to do it. You and I, we both know how. My old, again, my old boss. I wish I could name her by name. I don't want to put anything like that out there. But I do love her. One of the most brilliant women I've ever met. Brilliant people. I shouldn't say just women. But she would tell me, like, Jay, as I was sitting down in the principal's office, their discussion. No, I'm just joking. Discussion. Jay, you know all this. You know this, but your knowledge to application. So apply that knowledge and the theory to practice. The other woman I was close with, as well. We always used to say, theory to practice, and that's where doing this and actually making that routine. And we can get into whether habits developed, in 17 days or 21 days, or whether it takes however much time it takes to drop a habit. That's what my motivation is, to kind of continue with the YouTube videos, to continue with the podcast, to continue with getting the information, the things that I'm doing now, I did in 2019, 2020 with the stop the thought process, get off, the actual physical addiction of, the substances. Whereas now it's like, all right, I don't have that problem, but only by the grace of God. Now I still have a continuing patterns that I'm seeing about the self-destruction, the
Mhm.
job loss, the not being able to communicate, the lack of self-care, and the lack of direction as far as that consistency. I mean, we both know consistency breeds success. I say it all the time. I know that anything logically, like I know that. However, physician, heal thyself again. Get up in the morning, like Gomez, like,
Well,
and they get that power. However, we need to get it.
well,
However,
no, there's something you hit on. Like, again, we go through terminology, and I think something that people also will mess up is not defining what consistency is.
mm,
So some people
okay,
think, right? So some people think, well,
doing
consistency,
something, doing something
like I have
regularly,
to do I have to hit every.
regularly, whatever interval you pick, whatever frequency you pick, um,
Well, and it
not
goes
missing
further. It goes further,
iterations.
yeah, it goes further than that. Like not only frequency, but quality. So it's like, well, I'm only going to eat these foods, and I got to eat 5 meals a day, and I can't eat past 8 p.m. And you're right. It's like and then you think you
Well,
have,
those are guidelines.
yeah, but what people think is consistency is I got to get hit all of them, and then once I
Yeah,
miss one of them, oh, I fucked it up, and then they just crash.
yeah.
So this goes back to the idea of that, Charles and Paul Chek talking about things like, best exercise program is one you'll do every day. Best diet is the one your client will follow. Is understanding your client's, personality. And then, what I do with people is I look at like, hey, unless you're going for some high level competition, which I know what that's like to train those people. And you don't need anywhere near that to get your goals. So if we're not in that type of high risk, high reward scenario, I only need you to follow about 70 to 80% of what I lay out. And to hit 80%, it's really easy when I reverse their negative, like it's a negative paradigm of, well, I've got to do this and I got to do this and I got to do this and I got to do this. And I say to them, like, yes, you have all these things you need to do, and that can become overwhelming. But if you have 100 things to do in the day, how many of them can you not do and still get 80%? 20
Well,
things.
but that's a little different. Then let me stop you there. So that's a little different of quantity,
Mhm.
like hitting goals
Yep.
and doing something like consistency.
Mhm.
So the consistency is doing it like we talked about before, like way earlier. And
Well,
I actually mentioned this to
what
a
is
group of
what is
directors.
what is consistency though?
It's the repeated.
Yeah,
I'm
but
gonna
yeah,
get a
so
dictionary.
like
It's
you're talking,
repeated.
so yeah, it's the repeated action of something. I get that, but it's what's the interval you have to. So consistency in theory is what you're saying is a definition. Consistency in application as a coach, and I think a lot of
Yeah.
coaches miss this, or at least they don't even. This doesn't register when they're talking to a client. Is like, hey, I got to like set their paradigm straight. Consistency for me is what I call the 80-20 rule. I need you to follow this 80% of the time. So if you have to eat
Daily.
and
Daily.
everything. So when you sit down, you need to hit 80% of your meals. And if you have 5 meals a day, that means 3 of them need to be exactly what I wrote on the plan. The other 2 could basically be whatever the hell you want. Oreo cookies and milk if you want. Just give me the other 3.
Is that the Pareto distribution? Is that what that is?
Yep. It's Pareto distribution applied. So I applied to that, and I learned that from this doctor of like private medicine when I was in New York City. And I didn't know what the Pareto principle is. I actually did not learn about it in formal education. And I got into a negotiation with New York Health and Rackets, like executive board, and we were looking at doing an overseen medical workout program
Yep.
with these 2 doctors out of New York, and we were pitching, I guess, the CEO and the COO, whatever, who ran all of the New York Health and Rackets, which at the time, I don't even know if they still exist, but they were bigger than New York Sports Club. And I think they had more locations than Equinox. So you're talking like early 2000s. But anyway, and I said in the meeting, the doctors kind of dropped the pitch, and the other guys were talking about money and how much we're going to split things, and if we do this enhanced training program, what and the charges. And I just started like looking at the numbers we were talking about. And I just started being like, okay, well, 80% of the time we're going to do this. And I just started working with this 80-20 thing.
Yeah.
And I said, well, if we're doing 80% of the work, you can't expect us to collect only 20% of the revenue. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask about 5% more here. And I went through my whole thing. We came out, and the one doctor he was just like, where did you come up with that? How did you apply that? And I'm like, what are you talking about? I don't know what you're talking about. And he's like, wait, you've never heard of the Pareto principle?
Yeah.
And, just Pareto principle of distribution. And I go, no, I've never heard of that. And I kind of like prided myself on being a decent math student, and I was like, no, I've never heard of it. And I was like 22, 20. I was like mid 20s. And he started laughing. He's like, basically you looked at the numbers, noticed this pattern, and then flipped it into a sales pitch, and then got them completely turned in the meeting to wanting to do what we wanted, not doing it, but on their side, they wanted to do it. And I was like, yeah, I just kind of could see that pattern through it. And then once that happened, I couldn't not stop looking for it. Then I forgot why I didn't really apply it in the beginning. It took me a little while, but then that's another thing that I saw that I started applying to my coaching. I think it was because I was always so perhaps not knowing how to create discipline with a client through the mental aspect. When I was a younger coach, I would create compliance through like really intense motivation. So I was like projecting my energy onto my clients and having to hit the diet perfect and having to hit all the workouts perfect, and consistency was 100% of goals achieved. So I think when I finally ran into like learning from Charles Poliquin, from both like, yeah, I'm an Olympic level strength coach and I have the best athletes, but I also have a very successful business, which means I have to be able to get people who don't want to get results. And the way you're going to do that is create, compliance is king. And then that is, the best diet is the one, you'll get the client to follow. So all that kind of was the evolution of coaching and my influence. So that's where I started just putting that Pareto principle on everything. And I was literally just saying it to the guy. There was a guy who was like, oh man, I was out at lunch and I had tater tots. The guy's like, I can't believe you ate tater tots. I'm like, I love tater tots. I was like, if there's tater tots are on the menu, I order it. And the guy's like, but I thought you were like this health organic. I was like, I am. I was like, and I live on an 80-20 rule. I don't sacrifice. I was like, that's my vice. I might not go out drinking on a Friday night, but I like to have a little bit of fried food. That's my vice, because I want to enjoy my life. I enjoy food, and I live on an 80-20 rule. 80% of the time I'm eating, really healthy, clean foods, cooked well. I'm drinking my water. I'm getting clean water. But you know what? If I want to have a root beer float and have some dairy and some ice cream and a soda and sugar and processed sugar on a Friday night after I watch a movie or some shit, hell yeah, man. It is, you know what I mean? Like, and I tell my clients that, when my clients, especially when they're like, oh, I didn't realize you're as old as you are, or I can't believe you're still doing that, at your age, or wow, and I'm like, yeah. And I don't turn down a cannoli. I never turn down, a cannoli. And you know what I mean? Like, you know what I'm saying? I'm never like, oh, sorry, my diet,
Well, it depends. So and that's us, like some people I need, like with foods. And then, again, there's another, I would love to talk about this another time. I was speaking with a friend of mine that I used to work with actually at the last school. And she was saying about how eating addictions.
Yeah.
And my mother as well, I spoke at length about this, where she says to me, Jay, at least you just have to keep substances out of your body. With food, we need food to live. So to have an addiction that you need to utilize, like you need to use food, but to control that, some people can't even have even a cannoli, you know what I mean? Like they can't have like even cheating. Like we're blessed. I'm blessed to be able to go by the, the Pareto, distribution.
Yeah, I think I can make a really substantial argument against that because, but that would be another rabbit hole, because you do put other drugs in your body that you don't get addicted to that have physical effects. There's a certain pathways that certain drugs act upon,
in general, if it's not good for you, like so because, like you don't need any. We don't.
Yeah, but so what happens is if somebody that has these really like, oh, once I eat something, I got to eat all of it or something like that. You understand there's a hormonal mechanism at play there where their cortisol is so heavy that the body sends out massive signaling for sugar so you can increase insulin production to suppress cortisol. So if you actually then fix the other things that are going on with them, they can eat, because by that logic, people who have eating disorders wouldn't ever be able to eat again. Do you see what I'm saying? Like people who've, right, bulimia, people who have, those type of things, because you always have to eat. Or alcoholics can never even drink a spritzer because it's carbonated like a beer. So I think that
could be triggering. I mean, it begs the question, could be triggering.
Well, I think that it's like a little bit of it's a kind of like we talked about at the beginning, is like you're kind of correlating a pattern that really is, when you get into the deeper aspects of it, there's like you said, you never realized this addiction was actually really a disease. This is not just like,
I didn't know that I mean, I kind of knew, but I guess I didn't want to accept it.
Just to that point, a lot of people
in the DSM. It's in the book now. Not that,
that's what I'm saying.
But now it's an actual like addiction or alcoholism per se. Specifically.
Let me say this in the last. I guess we'll give, because I did want to get to this. I kind of wanted to, because I knew I could do this, which was, the title of being, using spirituality to get jacked. So in the last 9 minutes, I'll give the secret. So we just talked about it. So what happens with having a strong spirit connection, and whether that's with your God or that's what I even say to people, if you're not ready to cross that bridge or talk about that, then you can look at something like, what's your higher purpose? Like, what do you feel your higher purpose in life is? So what happens with that is that's one of the things that will keep you fat or keep you from putting muscle on, testosterone and all that kind of stuff, is high levels and erratic levels of cortisol. One of the best ways to control your cortisol has to do with your mentality, how you mentally are able to dispel stress.
There we go.
And one of the strongest ways we know how to dispel stress is when people have that higher purpose or higher sense or higher connection, because you see people that are going through a stressful time, but they're like, God is good. I got this. God's got me.
Yep.
And I've always had, when I was younger, I did have that bitter aspect of like, oh, here we go with this shit. Yeah. But as I've gotten older, I've realized, wow, I see the power in that. Once you start having to deal with difficult things, and then you realize those things, you're like, oh, I do have a higher purpose or what have you. So, if you really are struggling, like, because I tell people, a lot of people can't get the last two bottom abs out, if they really want that extreme six pack. Mm-hmm. And that has a lot to do with cortisol, irregular cortisol. So if you really want to get in women that have a kind of little bit of a distended stomach, all that is irregular cortisol. So one of the only things you can really do to control cortisol is you mentally have to be able to control your stress.
Well, that's it. Stress. Yes.
So one of the big drivers of being able to control stress, so that you're not pumping cortisol, which means you sleep better. So you want to get better gains, and you're spending all this money on zinc and magnesium, but you're going to bed still pissed off. You're fighting with what you're doing instead of getting everything on one track, which is, okay, understanding a higher purpose and understanding your relation to God will drastically affect your stress levels. And if you get your cortisol levels under control, you'll drastically increase. And again, I'm using a pretty free term without defining drastically, but somebody could push back and say, but drastically meaning, I think you'll notice it within like 2 to 3 weeks getting your stress under control. I think you'll notice whatever your goal is, whether it's to get bigger and stronger or to get leaner and more ripped, I think you'll notice that you'll get them quicker.
Yeah, well, that's the goal. Like whatever the goal is,
And I think to wrap it up, if you look at what Jay presented in the beginning in the book, one of the things this person said in the book, this rabbi and psychologist and counselor, is that one of the strongest ways to help people through their difficult times is to give them this purpose. And what happens in difficult times? You're highly fucking stressed.
Yes.
So here he is saying one of the great ways, and then what happens when you have an addiction, you become highly stressed and you can't handle it, you fall into your addiction.
Yep.
Here you have as a bona fide expert in a book telling you one of the best ways that he can help people not to trigger back into their addiction is to handle their stress. And the way you handle that stress is having that strong spirituality.
Yeah, it's part of the coping mechanism. It's
Yeah.
another coping mechanism. You know, it's an
So,
alternate coping mechanism, and
so
that's
if
what it
you,
comes down
yeah.
to.
So if you're not dealing with an addiction, but you're like a bodybuilder, or you're a MMA fighter, or you're just somebody who wants to lose 10 pounds and you just have that last 10 pounds you can't get off, it's your stress. It's your stress. If you find a higher purpose in your life and you find maybe a higher connection, maybe, it's kind of funny, but I think I can make a very logical argument, maybe going to mass more often, or maybe going to synagogue,
Or whatever. Yeah.
or
However,
if you're Jewish, following Shabbat. Do you know how much more less stress you have in your life if you shut everything down at sundown on Friday? Like,
yep.
I've gotten into that now. I learned that when I went to Israel. That's why my phone goes on like silent at 8. And unless it's like my son or a family member, nobody can reach me. And that's part of my, like, you know what, like, the world can survive without me till tomorrow morning. I need some peace. I need to disconnect.
Well,
And I got that from the Jews in Israel. Yeah. And I got that from them. And I was like, wow, because when I did that, when I was there, I was like, oh my God, what a completely different sense of self I have.
Yeah.
You're disconnecting. And I'm not even Jewish. So, and I still felt amazingly connected to God. I went to the synagogue. I went to all the prayers. I went to the prayers in the morning, everything. I did the straight up full thing. And man, I was just the sense of peace and recharging you have. So I tried to kind of bring that back with me. I'm not always successful, but I try to.
You did. So that's to come back to the hero's journey. I mean, I remember when you went to Israel, and that's something that you had just an example of what you just had brought back about shutting down the electronics and kind of shutting off at a certain, giving yourself that time to decompress.
Yeah.
To decompress and to check out, to where you're not, and it's ego too, like you had said, that's an ego reduction. Like, the world can be all right, like the world's going to be okay.
Yeah, it's gonna be good. Yeah,
like everyone's fine. My son, your son's fine. Your family members are fine. Everyone that needs to be in there is taken care of. But that's the hero's journey, and that's an example of you had brought back. That's a literal journey,
Yeah.
And I try not to use the word literally, because it seems to be, I don't know if you picked up on this, but even Rogan is using the word literally. It's like, where did this come from? Within the past year or so, now, even on the news, if you notice, like, people use the word literally.
If I had to take a guess, it's
I don't know what it's from.
Well, it's a repercussion of the fact that we've had so much BS in the news, and we've had so much kind of lying to us,
like fakeness. Okay, it's a realness.
Well, yeah, because look at how many people over-exaggerated so much shit, and now it's like you have to preface something by saying, "Okay, no. I'm not saying this happened on TikTok. I mean, literally happened right in front of me, right?
Yeah.
Like, now everyone has to have a pre-qualifier because now, if I had a knee-jerk guess, that's because I haven't noticed literally, but I have noticed it's how much BS we've had out there, that now people are like qualifying things that didn't seem like they would qualify before, especially with the news. That's a whole nother goddamn rabbit hole we could go down. But to wrap up, I really can make a very physical and logical argument that, going to synagogue or going to church or going to mosque, a higher sense of self. Or I don't, I apologize, I'm not as well educated in like Buddhism, but whatever that perhaps of prayer or rest day is, like, you start observing that more, you're going to start, because you're going to get your psyche better in control. You're going to get your cortisol levels better in control, and cortisol is the killer of growth.
Yeah.
So being more spiritual, really can actually help you get more jacked, especially if you're training your ass off or you're training hard. That's why when these high level athletes go into camps, whether it's football camp or a fight camp, they ain't bringing their whole family.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? Like, they don't, you know what I mean? They all move into like a dorm or a hotel, or they move into a very area where they just cut the whole world out, so they don't have any of those outside stressors. That's not only just for focus, that also gives you, focus and understanding. They're like, oh, well, it's not really for physical job to get jacked. It's mental, so they can focus on learning the play. It's like, yeah, well, what do you think? What do you think memory is? Memory is a intellectual exercise in which you need to do something repetitively so it sticks. We have the same thing if you're trying to learn the football players, you're trying to learn a fight combination. You have to do this repetition thing, and you can't have this out, and then you need to recover.
Yep.
So I see you dodging like that. All right.
I'm trying to get because she's anyway. This is gonna be a funny
Yeah.
video. Actually, I can't wait because some of it is good. I
Yeah.
can't wait.
You gotta get her to burn some energy. What the hell?
No, she's good. Yeah, no, you're right. But and we're cutting the sugars. We just had pomegranates this morning.
No. Oh, okay.
Fresh
Cool.
pomegranate. Yeah, fresh pomegranate. Sure. Give me the bowl.
Oh, nice.
No, that's right. So we had the sugar talk the other day. Yep. So here's my bowl of fresh pomegranates.
Very
Love it. And we can go down again. We can do another thing with that. But no, just to kind of recap, that spirituality piece, affects the mental. It goes hand in hand with the mental, and it's not necessarily religious. It could be separate from religion.
Mhm.
But and it helps with that, with like you said, with that stress hormone, with the cortisol spike. And that's what it's all about, man. That stress, that's what it's all about.
Sorry, I got a whole bunch of other stuff going on outside.
Yeah, no, I see that. Again, it's a repeat. But no, we can end. I mean, whenever
Yeah,
you want.
we got a good hour. Yeah, we got a good hour.
This is good stuff. So I want to clip this, get on with the day, and kind of go back to this. So, thank you again.
I got it. Thank you, Avery. It was good seeing you and meeting you.
Thank you.
Charcoal.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool.
Good.
And every time he's here.
All right, my man. I will remember I tell you stay on. I'm gonna hit the banner and the music, and then you'll be good to go.
All right. Thank you, John.
You
Appreciate
keep doing
it.
the dancing.
Thank you, everybody.
You got it, man.
Avery.